Welcome to Jubilee Campaign's United Nations Human Rights Council parallel event. We have entitled this event, Justice and Accountability in Nigeria. I am Anne Buwalda, the Executive Director of Jubilee Campaign. It is with great concern that the international community receives weekly reports, and I would dare say often more frequent than weekly reports, of violent attacks occurring in the northeast of Nigeria. These attacks have left thousands killed and wounded, including men, women, and children, and many have been murdered. These ongoing terrorist attacks perpetrated by Boko Haram, a well-renowned terrorist organization, as well as other violent militias, such as those connected with Fulani militants, these are already dire humanitarian situation that has broken out. We have seen the large-scale displacement and the risk of famine in the northeast of Nigeria, and Jubilee Campaign has partnered with local organizations who provide aid to these IDPs, and the numbers are staggering. In September 2019, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Extrajudicial, Summary, or Arbitrary Executions, Ms. Agnes Callamard, who will be speaking with us today as one of our panelists, she published an end of the visit statement regarding her visit to Nigeria. In that statement, she concluded that the situation in the northeast and middle belt of Nigeria is, quote, a matter of urgency, unquote. And she called for investigations into the violence and killings. Similarly, in 2020, the UK all-party parliamentary group for international freedom of religion and belief, and again, one of our distinguished speakers today was part of that all-party parliamentary group in the UK, Baroness Cox. They published a report entitled Nigeria Unfolding Genocide. And in this report, they highlighted the rapidly expanding violence perpetrated by jihadist Fulani militants and with utter impunity. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has outright rejected both of these respected reports, which Jubilee Campaign has responded to publicly and published our response to that. We convene this parallel event to encourage states to pass a resolution to initiate a commission of inquiry in order to investigate the ongoing atrocities and crimes against humanity taking place in Nigeria. These are being perpetrated by all sides, and the start of such needed evidence collection would be such a commission. We also hope to move the discussion about the situation in Nigeria from investigation to measurable actions. We are honored today to have a group of distinguished speakers who will share their expertise and some of them their experiences. Our first speaker is the Honorable Baroness Cox, a member of the UK House of Lords, as well as a member of the all-party parliamentary group for international freedom of religion and belief. Baroness Cox is also the founder and CEO of the Humanitarian Aid Relief Trust, or HART, which seeks to provide aid and global advocacy for individuals suffering religious persecution. Baroness Cox has made numerous international visits to meet with survivors of persecution, and she's made numerous visits to Nigeria. She will be addressing us today regarding the report that was published, and her organization in November 2019 also published Your Land or Your Blood, regarding the persecution of displacement of Christians in northern and central Nigeria. Baroness Cox, we give you the floor.
Thank you for the great privilege of speaking in this very, very important meeting. Nigeria, I'm passionately concerned about, and we entitled the report by the all-party parliamentary group, Nigeria Unfolding Genocide, because that is what we fear it may well be and should be recognized for what it is. Next slide, please. These are some of the tragic statistics. They can be updated, actually. They're worse than they are here, but just a few to highlight the scale of the suffering, the scale of the killings. Since 2020, Boko Haram killed 43,000, the Islamist Fulani killed 19,000. Since June of 2015, 12,000 Christians killed, 2,000 churches burnt. January to June, southern Kaduna, 300 Christians massacred, and many more since. That's still going on. And these are just examples to highlight. And of course, remember that behind every figure, there is a tragedy. There is loss, there is grief, and it's heartbreak land. May 2020, 350 Igbo villages occupied by Fulani herders and Shua Arab mercenaries. And just recently, they've started the Islamist Fulani moving down into Yoruba. So it's spreading. And of course, the fact that ISIS is there, ISWAP, shows the jihadist nature of what is happening and their probable intention. Next slide, please. In my small NGO heart, we believe in traveling to the places to visit. We want to get the evidence presented at first hand, so our government can't say they're fake photographs, which they tend to do. These are the evidence, but above all, we want to be with the people, to show our solidarity with them, to pray with them, and to get the evidence, but to show that we do care and we are there. And in heart, we try to provide both aid and advocacy. So we ask them their priorities for aid and also what are the messages they want us to tell the world. This was our most recent visit. This is a very typical picture, I'm afraid, of a burnt church. And I'm afraid I could show so many of those. Next slide, please. The Fulani attacked villages. This is 4 villages which they attacked a little way back. And most people had fled. They had nowhere to flee to, stayed. But when we were in that village, you could see the Fulani herders or cattle all around. And we also stood in the home of the pastor who had been slaughtered there. So you stand in the homes of modern day martyrs. Next slide, please. And this is the remains of his home. And as I say, it makes one feel very humble to be there where someone has recently been martyred. And I'm afraid we come across that experience in a lot of places where we work. But we want to pay tribute to those who are holding front lines of faith and freedom for the rest of the world. Next slide, please. This is another village where everything has been completely destroyed by the Islamist Fulani. These were people's home and the shops, but everything is devastated and destroyed. Next slide, please. And one of the horrendous aspects of the current jihadist attacks is they don't only kill, and that's bad enough, but they perpetrate atrocities. And when our British government says this is tit for tat between farmers and herders, I'm sorry, tit for tat does not include this kind of appalling atrocity. This young mum, she tried to flee with her 6-year-old daughter, and she tried to leave. They were surrounded. She was attacked with a machete. And then they said, your 6-year-old daughter would like to suck her mother's finger. So they cut off her finger, as you can see there. And then when she came round, as she passed out, came round, her little 6-year-old daughter was next to her with her mother's finger stuck in her mouth. That's not tit for tat. This is atrocities. And next slide, please. All one can really do in these situations is to hug and love and pray and be alongside. And Heart is privileged to do that, as well as asking their priorities for aid and advocacy, but to be there in love and to obtain the evidence. Next slide, please. And here we are around a mass grave. There's another village that's been attacked. None of this really reaches the British media at all. This is going on, and the British government, as I say, belittles it and does provide no aid whatever in the Middle Belt, where so many thousands are displaced, so many thousands have lost loved ones and livelihoods. Next slide, please. And Archbishop Ben Quash's words, Archbishop for Dross or Plateau State, were thinking of, if we have a faith worth living for, it's a faith worth dying for. Don't you, that's us, compromise the faith that we are living and dying for. That's a challenge to us, a challenge for action. Next slide, please. If there is another one, I'm not sure. May have come to the end of my slideshow. Yes, because I wanted to keep short because I know the time is very precious. But I'll just conclude by saying that not only mustn't we compromise the faith, but we have to take action. And I'm very glad that one of the priority theses or priority foci of this meeting is to consider action, because certainly the British government, we've been complicit for too long, denying what's happening, refusing to provide aid in Middle Belt, and action is desperately needed. So thank you for letting me share the pain and the passion. Thank you.
Baroness Cox, we thank you for providing these very illustrative statistics which show the scale of the violence, which is absolutely staggering. As you say, each figure is a tragedy, and it's with great sadness that we review these statistics and that we see what's occurring there. Your photos, again, they just really are showing in a dramatic way what is taking place. Some of our later panelists will be providing more details of the situation on the ground. I would like to mention to our viewers, if you have questions, you're welcome to pose those questions, and at the end, our distinguished panelists look forward to providing answers to your questions, or we will follow up electronically to you with answers to your questions. Our next speaker, who will be providing his remarks via pre-recorded video, is the Honorable Hungarian politician Tristan Azbej. Mr. Azbej is the State Secretary for the Aid of Persecuted Christians, as well as the State Secretary for the Hungary Helps Program at the Prime Minister's Office in Hungary. Mr. Azbej's work is to present the cause of persecuted Christians in various international forums, and his organization has hosted multiple side events on this topic at the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva and the UN General Assembly in New York. We will now play Mr. Azbej's video remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, the truth will set you free. That's why we are here today. If you want to sum it up very shortly, we can say that this is the goal of today's event. The government of Hungary therefore welcomes this initiative, and for this reason, first of all, allow me to thank the initiators. Hungary is committed to a responsible political culture in which there is no room for irresponsibility without consequences, and above all, no place for injustice. The situation, however, is that Nigeria is suffering in the recent years. Tens of thousands of innocents have fallen victim to Islamist terror and faith-based hatred over the past decade. Let us speak clearly. Seeing the genocides against humanity, there is no room for equivocation. Nigeria has become a blood-soaked land after the anti-Christian ravaging of Islamist terrorist organizations like Boko Haram, the Islamic State in West Africa province, and the Fulani jihadi tribes. Just last year, more than 4,000 Christians were killed in Nigeria simply because of their faith, and today it can be said that most victims of Christian persecution are here. Dear ladies and gentlemen, tell the truth and act accordingly. It is my conviction that only this attitude, this straightforwardness, this political philosophy can be the key to the end of a dark chapter. And the clean sheet can finally open for those who have so far experienced only persecution and suffering, danger to life and exclusion. This will lead yesterday's forgotten to be tomorrow's protagonists. Tell the truth and act accordingly. The government of Hungary acknowledges this. Against the tide, we have stated that most persecuted religion in the world is Christianity. There are 340 million persecuted Christians and an average of 13 Christians killed for their faith every day. We have told the truth and acted accordingly. In 2016, we were the first in the world to establish a government unit as a tool to combat the persecution of Christians. And to help persecuted Christians, in 2017, we launched the Hungary Helps Program, Hungary's international humanitarian aid and development program. In the last 4 years, we have been able to help more than 100,000 people in regions where communities are affected by war, terror, persecution, or humanitarian disaster. Millions of Nigerians have already been forced to flee their homeland because of the activities of armed jihadists, and many have been forced to leave Nigeria. Our position, therefore, is that it is not the people who get in trouble that need to be dispatched, but the help needs to be taken to where the trouble is. That's how we got to Nigeria. One of the basic conditions for staying in the homeland and returning home is to ensure the free practice of religion. We want everyone to be able to profess their faith and freely in Nigeria and anywhere in the world without having to suffer discrimination or persecution because of it. Without this, freedom is confined in prison, and we have witnessed this handcuffed freedom in recent times, seeing the increasingly worrying, increasingly brutal persecution of Christians. Dear ladies and gentlemen, there is no abstract truth, only truth manifesting in acts. And this means that the act is the first, the word is second. The government of Hungary is committed to this principle through the Hungary Helps program. In Nigeria, we have supported the restoration of the education and health infrastructure destroyed by Boko Haram and the renovation of a seminary in the Diocese of Maiduguri. We supported the development of the educational and health infrastructure of the Diocese of Sokoto, the return of Christian refugees, and the strengthening of self-sufficient agricultural activity. The operation of a malaria clinic in the state of Adamawa, the treatment of infectious diseases caused by floods, the purchase of medicines and medical equipment for the St. Charles of Borromeo Hospital, and the Food Aid Action Plan. Ladies and gentlemen, demanding the truth and demanding accountability is not some kind of bloodthirsty revenge, but an expression that we say no to religious fanaticism and hatred, terror and persecution, and even join the cry of the innocent sufferers saying never again. It is the cry of those whom you have not heard or who have been silenced by indifference and blindness. The situation is that among sinners, the silent is an accomplice. Therefore, we cannot remain silent, but with this initiative, we all join in this cry and want to be the voice of the weak. Let's not forget the African proverb, when elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. The innocents are not only victims of the bloody conflicts, but they will be the biggest victims themselves even after the apparent closure of the conflicts. So for the future, it does matter what the answer is to the sins of the past. Justice and accountability, while not giving back the lives of the victims or the embrace of the lost loved ones, is a message to everyone that such blatant sins cannot go unpunished. Although justice and accountability do not make bloody wounds disappear, they start the social process that leads to healing and recovery. Last but not least, justice and accountability provide protection and security for those who live their lives in fear of terror and hatred. Ladies and gentlemen, we Hungarians believe in the culture of action. This is what our Christian roots of 1,000 years teach. It is our historical experience that truth and freedom walk hand in hand, meaning that both are lost if one is let go. Therefore, I am optimistic about your commitment to truth and accountability, in which the government of Hungary intends to participate, as we did in the past and will in the future, and which gives hope that Nigeria and all its religious communities can enjoy freedom and peace on the road of the common good. To this end, I wish you further strength and perseverance.
Campaign thanks the Hungarian government for their culture of action and their aid programs, including the aid that was just described being provided to central and northern region of Nigeria. This is in contrast to what Baroness Cox just told us, where the UK government has not provided any aid to the central part of Nigeria, which is unfortunate. And we hope that the UK government will improve its aid allocations along that line. We appreciate all that the country of Hungary has been doing for northern Nigerian and central Nigerian victims and how they've provided for them. Our next speaker is Mr. Stephen Enada. Mr. Enada is the executive president of International Committee on Nigeria, or ICON. This is an organization which focuses on building coalitions with other organizations across issues that affect the vulnerable in Nigeria, as well as providing accurate statistics on killings, persecutions, fault lines, and other drivers of violence. Mr. Enada also is a former U.S. government-sponsored exchange program alumnus on religious freedom and interfaith dialogue, where he became a frequent speaker to U.S. government-organized symposiums on sub-Saharan Africa. ICON has provided an extensive report last July in which the statistics were provided for IDPs, many of the causes, and regrettably many of the country-specific, the community-specific areas where persecution and violence has taken place. Right now, we are pleased to have Mr. Enada join us, and we give him the floor to provide his statistics and information. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity to participate in this project. And it is also our delight as an organization to be part of this noble cause. We are appalled by what is happening in Nigeria, especially blacking out killings, genocide, atrocity. Why many people are still believing genocide is loading, our report says that genocide is taking place in Nigeria. So that made us to go into the field to bring about our data, which is Nigeria silent slaughter, genocide in Nigeria and the implication for the international community. So we even extracted something from the voice of the martyrs when you have a lot of people being grossly murdered. Rufi Dapai, who was a student in the University of Maiduguri, was abducted and killed. A Catholic seminarian, Nandi Michael, was beheaded, and Reverend Lawan Andini in Adamawa State also was beheaded, among many other Christians who were victims. Now, if you look at attack against Christians, Leah Sharibu is still in captivity despite President Buhari assurances. Sarah Chibogies are still in captivity. These are girls turned to sex slaves, more kidnapped nearly every week. People groups targeted and land takeover by Fulani militants, Rigwe people in Miango in Plateau State, Adara Kingdom in Kaduna, Agatu in Benue State. Since 2000, Boko Haram Fulani militants attack and destroy over 13,000 churches. Now, when you talk about deaths and incidents, Boko Haram 2015 to 2020, you look at by region, our data statistics have to bring these by region, Northeast, North Central, and even some other parts of Nigeria. And when you talk about even Sub-Saharan Africa, how terrorist groups like ISIS and also like ISIS West Africa, ISWAP, how they contribute, and then you begin to see that Boko Haram, Fulani militant are fighting this proxy war with ISIS, even from Central African Republic to Mali, to Niger, to Chad, and to Cameroon. This, our report captures how the trend of the flow of arms and also how this war is being waged. And don't forget that this is actually a war started by Boko Haram to Islamize Nigeria or to declare Nigeria as an Islamic territory. So example of discriminatory practices in our report, attacks on Christian 2010 to 2019, our report was able to bring that about. So you begin to see deaths by act.
Go ahead, you muted for a second, but we can hear you again.
All right, sorry for that. So now we look at deaths and incidents, all actors 2015 to 2020 by Boko Haram, by Fulani, and incidentally, there are government actors. when you see governor of Kaduna State protecting the killers, then we have some ethnic and local militia also as a result of this. So these are actually religious conflict, and it nosedives into ethnic conflict as well. So now we have these 20 years of slaughter in Nigeria, and then you, like I said, we have mapped out from January 2000 to January 31st, 2020. So this, our main focus in this report is to demonstrate genocide in Nigeria from January 1, 2000 to January 31st, 2020. And then we recognize that there are several types of perpetrators, but we concentrate on two main actors: Boko Haram, ISIS, Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, Fulani, Haida militant extremists. Then our data sources include Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, which is ACLE data. We use Nigeria Security Tracker of Council for Foreign Relations. We also study of terrorism and responses to terrorism of University of Maryland. And our own app users, we develop an app called Eyewitness to Atrocity developed that we use to collect information from feed. So ICON goals and purpose, like Anne has rightly said, is to advocate on behalf of these voiceless Nigerians, and also to expose atrocities and slaughter, what needs to be done. So advocacy groups and individuals working together. We have our partner, International Organization for Peace Building and Social Justice. They are working with us. And then we also have some politicians, thought leaders, government organization, non-governmental organization, who are solution-oriented and who are actually joining in this advocacy. But what is happening in Nigeria is that Nigeria government is culpable, Nigeria government is embodying terrorist activities, and Nigeria is actually a failed state. So we wanted to be a voice to those in Nigeria. Like I've said, atrocity and human rights violation occur every day. Our main focus is to demonstrate genocide in Nigeria, and this data proves that. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Stephen Enada, for presenting details from your report, Nigeria Silent Slaughter. I read through the report last summer when it was released, and I found the statistics to be well documented. And what you're saying today, over 13,000 churches destroyed in 20 years, is staggering. And then you come to the place of the loss of life during that period, which is, of course, even more devastating and tragic. It's true that these statistics, which you have documented, may be only the tip of the iceberg, since many incidents are never reported in any publication. And we are so grateful that your organization and you are working on data collection, as we need to not forget this loss of life. We need to focus on those who have tragically lost loved ones, and the numbers are reflective of what's occurring there. And so we thank you for your very hard work in coming up with Freedom of Expression Project, Ms. Agnes Callamard. Special Rapporteur Callamard is a human rights expert who focuses specially on women's rights, refugee movements, and accountability. And she has conducted human rights investigations in various nations in Africa. In the interim, we will go on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Ms. Alheri Magaji. Ms. Magaji is the daughter of Bawa Magaji, the current leader of the Adara chiefdom in Nigeria. In June 2019, Ms. Magaji spoke at an event hosted by the Heritage Foundation, where she revealed that the predominantly Christian Adara group has suffered numerous attacks that leave hundreds dead and thousands displaced. As a matter of fact, Jubilee campaign focused on the Adara, basically the genocide that the Adara people have suffered. in Nigeria, and we presented that information to the International Criminal Court. So we have been following carefully what the suffering of the Adara people group have occurred. And we're grateful today to have Ms. Magaji with us. She operates Radai Foundation, an organization based in southern Kaduna State that focuses on providing aid and assistance for internally displaced persons and other victims of crisis in the region. Ms. Magaji, we now turn the floor over to you, and thank you that you can join us today.
Thank you for having me. So I work with the displaced people in Kaduna State. We have thousands and thousands. The last time we had a count, there were about 20,000 displaced people in one local government. And with about over 20 local governments in Kaduna alone, you can just imagine the sheer number of the people. And part of what we do is to create awareness that these things do exist. And they exist because the government really doesn't do anything for the victims. If we don't talk about it, then even individuals can't even help. All the help we've gotten to these people comes from individuals and private organizations. So CAPU helps in a lot too. And that's the reason why my partner Ruben Buhari and I even started in the first place. The first time we counted them, there were 12,480 displaced people in camps. They had no food, they had no shelter, it was cold, the children were sleeping on the bare floor. We have children who have had to be amputated because they don't have money for medical bills. And so the whole leg gets cut off because of less than $1. And we believe these are things that the government can intervene. And that's where justice for us comes in. These people did nothing wrong. It doesn't matter what it is. When there are humanitarian situations like this, we believe that the government has a responsibility to take care of people. But when they're left at the mercy of individuals and private organizations, then there is a problem. And then the crime rate escalates too, because we have youth restless, doing nothing, no homes, nowhere to stay. And the thing is, they need to be empowered to go back to their homes, to rebuild their lives again. These people have lost everything they've earned and worked for their whole lives. They have had to run away from their villages with just literally the clothes on their back. And how do they begin? How it's a crisis, because how do you begin to, where do you even begin? Because most of them cannot even go back to their villages. Their villages are still occupied by Fulani herdsmen as I speak to you right now. The villages.
Ms. Magaji has been with us from Nigeria, so we regret for the audio issue and the freezing of her internet connection.
Hello everybody, my name is Alheri Magaji. I am Adara from Kojuru local government in Kaduna State here in Nigeria. I'm the co-founder of RADI, Resilient Aid and Dialogue Initiative. It's an organization that birthed from the crisis that rocked the Adara people in 2019, but it has now expanded to helping the helpless in general, especially the victims of the crisis in Kaduna State. In 2019, we realized that there were thousands and thousands of people who were helpless, no clothes, no food. Children were malnourished because they literally ran away from their villages with the clothes on their backs, while sleeping villages were attacked. And as I speak to you right now, we have a lot of them who are stranded in villages like Rimo and Kufana and Iburu because their villages are still occupied by Fulani herdsmen. And so what we do is we try to provide them with clothing, with food, with somewhere to stay, instead of just sleeping on the bare floor. And what we really want to do as an organization is to empower people. We can't keep feeding people all the time. You give someone food in 3-4 days, it's finished, and then it's not sustainable to just keep giving them food all the time. So what we really want to do is to empower them so that they can do the society. But we can't do that because the immediate need is people are literally dying from hunger. So instead of the resources that we could use to empower these people to rebuild their lives, we're buying food all the time, we're buying clothes, we're buying medicine. We had a little girl whose leg was amputated because she didn't have less than $1 to go to the hospital. Her sister died. Her sister was shot while she and her sister were trying to run away from the herdsmen, and her parents are helpless. And even those that could have been able to do something had everything they've ever worked for all their lives taken away from them. They'll be sleeping in their homes and then be attacked mostly in the early hours of the morning. And then you're running for your life. You can't even pick anything. And so we have people who have had to cut off their limbs because the limbs were rotten due to lack of funds to go to the hospital. So we find that most of what we do, most of what our resources go into trying to save people, pay bills at the hospital, feed them, clothe them, and it's not right. This is what the government is supposed to do. These people didn't do anything wrong. The government is supposed to take care of these people. And they're left at the mercy of kind-hearted people, kind-hearted individual organizations, and it's I could talk for hours.
We have a question from Douglas Burton to Alheri or Stephen. So Stephen, I would appreciate if you could take the question. Tell us how farmers try to defend themselves with locally made either weapons or other federal gun control preventing self-defense. I understand that self-defense is an issue. Can you inform us what kind of defense or what kind of assistance is being done to improve security in that region in Nigeria?
Thank you for that question. Local farmers in Nigeria are prevented from carrying weapons. Even there was a mopping of local weapons that you refer to as Dane guns in Nigeria that farmers usually use to hunt animals for their meat. But at that, government went and mop up all of those arms from even the local farmers, making them to be more vulnerable. They can't defend themselves. And then Nigerian law doesn't even permit.
Stephen, your internet has also frozen up here. Are you back? I would have enjoyed the rest of your response to that question. I do have a question regarding the security situation in that area, and I would like to know, Baroness Cox, are you able to address the question if the Nigerian government or what the Nigerian government might be doing to improve the security situation? It's my understanding that troops and military efforts have been rather unsuccessful in providing security. Perhaps you could give us your evaluation of the situation as it relates to security. Thank you.
Well, it's a cause of great concern from everyone to whom we speak. In terms of the response of the security forces, very often that isn't there, or it comes far too late. We were told, for example, that in some parts of these afflicted areas, before the police can come, they have to get permission, or the army can come, they have to get permission from Abuja, from the top people, and by the time that goes there and then comes back, a lot of the killings would have been done, and it's far too late. Also, cause for concern is that in many cases it is reported that the military and security forces had themselves attacked civilians, so there is not much confidence. There have been cases where the military and the security forces have protected civilians, but I think the appalling statistics on the number of deaths and killings and attacks speak for themselves, where people have not been protected and desperately need protection. We heard that wherever we went. They feel they do not get the protection they need, and sometimes they actually get attacked by those who are intended or meant to be protecting them. So it's a very, very tough situation. And wherever we go, people say that the Nigerian government is not doing enough to ensure that the security forces, the military, the police, and so on, do protect the local people. As I say, I think the figures of those killed and those displaced speak for themselves as the lack of adequate protection that they've had. And it's very serious and very tragic.
I appreciate that. It's also my understanding that it's actually the federal government that has jurisdiction over the police in Nigeria, that each individual state does not actually operate its own police forces, with some exceptions related to Islamic policing, that it happens in the northern 13 states that have adopted Islamic law. But in the other areas, it is my understanding that the federal police forces are often absent. At times, they are even tipping off the perpetrators. It's my understanding that they may even be complicit at times with the perpetrators, even though the policing and the military barracks, etc., that are present there are supposed to be mixed troops involving both northern and southern military personnel or policing. So there have been numerous recommendations made to the Nigerian government, one of which is to permit states to train their own policing forces so that local communities can have a safer environment. And that's one of the things we'd like to encourage take place. At this time, I would like to shift to the idea of initiating a commission of inquiry in order to investigate the situation there in Nigeria. And Baroness Cox, I would like to again receive your comments, and then if Stephen Enada is back with us, I'd like to hear from him. But it would be great if we could learn how the Commission of Inquiry, a UN appointed Commission of Inquiry, might have some opportunity to be effective in the area.
I think it would be immensely important. At the moment, I mean, I speak for Britain, but we don't get any adequate coverage of what's happening. And sometimes when we do raise these issues with government, they're treated skeptically. And there is, according to the British government, there's a parity of aggression between the Christian farmers and the Islamic herders. And there's no real representation of the reality, the statistics, the tragedy, and the extent of the suffering of those killed, those suffering atrocities, those who've lost loved ones, who've lost lives, who've lost lands, have lost homes, the suffering of the IDPs, as was being mentioned earlier. There's no really recognition of that, and therefore I think a commission of inquiry, which is able to bring irrefutable evidence of the situation, and therefore the irrefutable need to do something to stop this, and I would call it a genocide, I think it fulfills all the criteria of genocide, would be very, very necessary and urgently needed. So it's a suggestion I would support wholeheartedly, and just add the urgent to the need for it.
That's outstanding. Stephen, I have a related question for you. How can civil society help moving this proposal forward at the Human Rights Council? It is claimed that bandits are forced into banditry due to poverty, that there's no clinics and no water treatment plants. All such projects have to be financed and implemented by the Buhari administration. To what extent has Buhari government created schools and clean water for migratory Fulani in northern states? I realize it's actually two questions here. One would be how civil society could help with moving forward our proposal at the Human Rights Council. And then the second question, which is directed to you, and that has to do with the claim banditry.
Yeah, thank you. Civil society, especially in Nigeria, localized in Nigeria, are not a formidable force, because there is a politicization of civil society space in Nigeria, making most of them to be beholden to government or a politician So that makes narrative to be diverse. When you are talking about Nigeria problem, atrocities, genocide in Nigeria, then the question people will begin to ask from time to time is why this narrative, why that narrative? If you look at the nomenclature, when you talk about Fulani militants, they will just say farmer herders conflict, and then this is a convenient path many local civil society organizations have taken. But one thing that unites is that atrocities have been committed, and then they are all clamoring this should stop. So with that, I think civil society space in Nigeria will be able to come together to support even this work at the United Nations Human Rights Council, because one, everybody is asking that these perpetrators, they must be prosecuted. They must be prosecuted, and this is a fact. Then when you talk about Fulani in Nigeria, Fulani actually are royalty now because Buhari has given them soft landing. What I was saying before that glitch occurred was that the governor of Bauchi says that Fulani are permitted to carry AK-47 to defend themselves, but they are the aggressors. And also Fulani have been given some money, federal government allocation, to the detriment of even farmers. So when you talk about the Fulani now, they coined the terms banditry to soften the atrocity Fulani militants are committing. I think that is my reaction to that, except I don't get the question very well, but that is my reaction.
Right, I appreciate your reaction to the question, because recent reports that I've seen, the blame is placed on banditry, and that is used as an excuse for abductions that have been taking place recently. We've heard of yet another large group, was it 200 plus students, again captured in one of the northeastern areas out of school, and that has really created an unfortunate pressure in those areas to close their schools and to end education, which sounds like the playbook of Boko Haram. And yet when you see the media reports, they say that the reason for those abductions is banditry. And it's hard to know without further investigation. Are you aware of attorney generals or others involved with investigations from the federal level in Nigeria? You mentioned that impunity has to end, but it seems that impunity continues for lack of investigations taking place. Do you have more information for us regarding that?
No, it has, and this is the tragedy of what is happening in Nigeria. We have not had any anybody, even from private to government, prosecuting or investigating. It's only in Benue State that the anti-open grace law that was enacted, that we see that there are some form of arrest, some Fulani who invaded farms were arrested, prosecuted, and even some are in prison. So that is the only state that, and then the other state that is following is Oyo State, where another kingpin, another leader, Fulani militant leader, was arrested yesterday. And you know what? Those who arrested this kingpin were arrested by Nigeria police. So now you begin to look at this imbalance, intimidation, and government lack of will, because they actually wanted Fulani militant to fight this proxy war, and then the coinage banditry is actually to manipulate and deceive people. Every form of bandit, even kidnapping girls. And let me just make this point. When they kidnap, abduct those girls from school, the problem is that not all of them return home, even though they pay ransom. Some of them are still trafficked. Some of them are sold as sex slaves. So that should be noted. Now, if you have people, bandit carrying AK-47, carrying sophisticated weapons to launch at schools and abduct kids and even go to farm and kill people. It's no longer banditry, no matter the nomenclature. It is lethal weapons they use to attack sleeping community.
Thank you for explaining in more detail of how the situation is developing, and in particular, we need to continue to speak out in order to encourage the Nigerian government to do the right thing. Stephen, we have another question directed for you. It seems that it is claimed that bandits are, wait, sorry. It seems to be more about Nigeria's civil society. What about the international community civil society? For example, Anglicans in the UK and the US should be pushing this because of their connection with Christians in Nigeria. What do you suggest we in the West do to push the Commission on Inquiry forward pertaining to reaching out to perhaps co-religionists and others in order to bring that forward?
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, everybody. If you had not been committed to this, we wouldn't have been having forum like this. So first of all, international community or civil society, international civil society organization, like your organization and others have been doing pretty much well on Nigeria. But what I think should happen now is a coordination between international organization and especially Washington policy space. We need to begin to advance, elevate these issues, and then we need to connect with UK also and churches to begin to let them know of what is happening, and then they will begin to speak to their representatives. With that, I think then when we are going, we must go with the request, because many times we don't even talk to, we engage these people to tell them about what is happening, but we never sometimes communicate to them. These are the action points. So International Commission on Inquiry is very appropriate, is timely, and it is going to be our tool as we engage to begin to say, look, we want this. This is our ask, special ask. Within that context, I think we can rally governor support around that. If you have that one voice, Jubilee campaign, International Committee on Nigeria, and every other person doing, and with Lady Cox, who is in the House of Commons, will begin to like tell her colleagues there, and we thank her for her leadership all this while. So for me, this is going to be the winning message. We want International Commission on Inquiry so that when we have US, UK leading the charge, then Nigeria government will listen. But all the scattered voices here and there cannot even bring about, what do I call it, some kind of pressure on Nigeria government. And Nigeria government doesn't like international pressure. But once this pressure is created, there will be momentum and there will be lulling in killings in Nigeria.
Excellent. We definitely appreciate the fact that we need to keep up the pressure. And yes, Jubilee campaign will do so. Baroness Cox is nodding that absolutely she, through the House of Lords and also her organization Heart, will keep that up. I have a couple of additional questions in our question box here. Before I get to those, I want to point out we are going to distribute the draft UN resolution on Nigeria, and in particular, the call for a commission of inquiry. We know that one of Baroness Cox's colleagues, Lord David Alton, is promoting and pushing this effort, and that is actually why we have our theme today for this event, which is essentially desiring that we have justice and accountability in Nigeria. A commission of inquiry would make that occur, and that's our effort. Ahmed, one of our viewers, has a question here. Does the Nigerian government have a horse in the race? That's a great question. Baroness Cox, are you able to address that? Would the Nigerian government have a horse in the race, so to speak?
All right.
Certainly, am I unmuted?
Yes, you are unmuted.
Much. And I think there's certainly indications being implied or spelled out during this important conference that the Nigerian government has been complicit in many ways in not calling people to account, in not imposing justice, in its partiality, and it's very, very worrying. But could I just, as it were, we say, go off piece for a moment, because I think in any discussion of what's happening in Nigeria, we need perhaps to see it as part of a bigger picture, because I think that's something that any solution is going to have to look towards, and that is the expansion, I'm afraid, of Islamist jihadism. The fact that ISIS is already there in ISWAP, the fact that the similar jihadist massacres and atrocities have spread now into Burkina Faso, and many Christians have been killed in Burkina Faso. It's gone down to Mozambique, and 2 cities there have been taken with horrendous bloodshed. And I have a nasty feeling that part of the weapons, or in fact, not in the weapons, but part of the whole military initiatives in Nigeria are part of that bigger picture. And I think we need to see Nigeria in that bigger context, because there are bigger issues there to discuss and to look at, rather than thinking all the problems are internal to Nigeria. I think some of them are promoted by, festered by Islamist jihadism, and that's got to be taken into account and not sort of written off as being Islamophobic to say so. Because when you talk to the people, they talk about the attacks on their villages. You know, so often the attackers come with their Allah Akbar, and when they're killing people, they refer to the fact that they're Christians and so on. And so I think the Islamist agenda and the broader international Islamist agenda is a factor that needs to be taken into account in any kind of analysis and solution.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of our viewers named Kamal is commenting that many times the perpetrators are motivated by religious zeal. And we do hear reports, and we know and understand from the report that the Forbes APPG presented that yes, there are educational, there are poverty issues, but lots of poor people in the world exist, and this is not how they respond to it. So the violence has multiple motivations, including that of religious zeal, and that needs to be addressed. And there need to be programs as well as efforts to uplift people out of poverty, absolutely. But those are efforts that need to take place in a concerted way, with also understanding that the religious zeal has to be addressed, and there needs to be efforts at engagement and dialogue. Stephen, as I read your earlier description of your background, it's mentioned that you have worked with interfaith dialogue. What kind of reactions have you experienced when interfaith dialogues take place? How successful have they been? And will that engagement be useful in the future when you're dealing with trying to counter religious zeal?
Thank you. And my experience with US government when I was nominated to participate in interfaith dialogue of State Department, and then going back to Nigeria and some countries in Africa, the purpose of this was really lost. Why? Because when you talk about you are bringing people of different faiths together to discuss, you don't really give advantage to others. So they did not really set the term of reference well, and that has actually reduced it to a talk show. And I have to be realistic, because when you want to measure the success is just that they bring people together. Bringing people together, they end up arguing. They end up saying this person is a cause and that person is a cause. And now many people became suspicious. Why? Because when US government through USAID sends in support, the support is one-sided. Now let me just say, if you look at USAID support, because they have to use the interfaith dialogue most of the times to aggregate what is happening. And having done that, you begin to see that a lot of millions of dollars have actually been sent to the Northeast. And who are the recipients? The recipients are not the victims. The recipients are most people who are perpetrating or feeding wrong information on that. So for me, I think the one that is going to work, which should be the transformed interfaith dialogue, is a multi-faith action through State Department. When you have this dialogue going on, bringing people together from the Potomac Declaration and the ministerial that was happening, I think if that is sustained, that to me the model is better than the other one I participated in the last 15 years. So that is my own idea about that. It has not succeeded, but I think the multi-faith action that is taking place through from the ministerial should be a great one. And then Ambassador Sam Brownback did well by handling that, and that has actually brought many people together to discuss and chart a new course. But that said, if there is a religious meeting, interfaith dialogue, it's still in Nigeria context. This is still controlled by Nigeria government that is culpable, Nigeria government that is passive, Nigeria government that is strengthening terrorism, strengthening ethnic division. They are the ones still in charge by nominating even some religious leaders to represent them. So sometimes what you hear from religious leaders is the echoing of political leaders' voice. So it has never been seen as a true cause for reconciliation.
Yeah, I appreciate the evaluation of someone who has participated with that. It seems that dialogue can be effective, but there needs to be a concerted effort to ensure that it's not just a session that breaks down into further discord. We need to ensure that there's actually true harmony being encouraged and raised up. And I think it takes a multiplicity of approach as well as a multilateral approach. We have another question here, also directed to Stephen. Stephen, you had mentioned that Nigeria is a failed state. We hear that comment often, that Nigeria is a failed state. On the other side of it, you also hold Nigeria responsible. So in your perception, is the government capable but unwilling, or is the government incapable of addressing the situation? And this is an important question. It's posed by one of our viewers who's actually an ambassador himself, an ambassador on Forbes. So the question is actually important because this is why Jubilee campaign has raised with the International Criminal Court the desire to expand the International Criminal Court's investigations, because we have concerns about the capability of the Nigerian government, or even that it's capable but unwilling. What's your thought on that? Is it, which way is it? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, if you look at failed state index, Nigeria has fulfilled that. That is incontrovertible. Even the killing that Boko Haram, Fulani militant have committed in Nigeria is more than that of ISIS in the Middle East. So you begin to see the poverty line, you begin to see collapse in military infrastructure, security agents. Nigeria government has capability to identify perpetrators, arrest them, but Nigeria government, because they've allowed this to fester for years, we are talking about a 20 years interval of allowing the militants, the terrorists to be entrenched and to continue to expand. So now Nigeria government may lack military capability, other security infrastructure to combat. But now, why Nigeria government is culpable is because once something like this happens, they have obligation to ask UK government, US government, that we have problem at hand, and then we lack military capability, we want support. They don't do that, meaning they wanted to go that route, and meaning they are culpable because it is actually government, what do I call it, responsibility to protect our citizens. Nigeria government is not doing that. And then you can see even Nigeria government taking side. Nigeria government saying that Fulani militant can own AK-47. And then you begin to look at even Nigeria government not admitting that this is not herders-farmer conflict. This is actually militants attacking sleeping community. So you can see Nigeria government culpability, and then at both ends, they are culpable because one, they never asked for international support to combat and flush out terrorism. And then in other measure, they don't even, let me just give you this example. Somebody who wants to end banditry. Now, some cows invaded farm in Osun State, Nigeria 2 weeks ago. Do you know what happened? It is the farmers that were arrested and boxed to Abuja to be queried by government security agents. So if you even begin to see another statement finally on Sheikh Gumi came, and this is what he said. He said Boko Haram should be granted amnesty, that is their right. And then that is their right. And then he said that they are even attacking. So these are government mouthpiece. So you begin to see Nigeria government lack of will, intention, and culpability. So it is really the box stops at Nigeria government desk to address this.
Wow. So we do regret that the Special Rapporteur is unable to join us. She was on early, and then she is informing us she is unable to participate because of internet issues as well. So we'd like to address the additional question. The motivation of perpetrators, as we have described, is multifold, including when perpetrators are motivated by religious zeal. I recall watching a video of actually an Al Jazeera report where they interviewed imprisoned Boko Haram members. And it seems that the effort to rehabilitate them needs to take place and needs to be very concerted when that happens, rather than just mass releases into the community, but actually have to have targeted rehabilitation. Because when they were asked the question, this victim who was killed, basically what you're arrested for at your hands, what do you think about that person and their family? And the surprise to me was the dehumanization. The response was they deserved it. And I think to address this, we have to overcome the kind of philosophy that says any human being deserves to be killed for any reason that is along that lines. I mean, there are other ways that the society needs to deal with disputes, and certainly killing someone and then feeling justified. I was surprised by the lack of remorse in the Boko Haram militant who was being interviewed. Not only a lack of remorse, a lack of any reflection of what he had done and how he had killed another human being. And so there are actually values that I think need to be placed into education, needs to be placed into communities that would bring about a preservation of human life and a desire to see that human life is carried forward in a positive way, you know, not that sort of reaction to it. There's a question in the chat box as well as to whether Jubilee Campaign and others would submit a letter to the delegation in Geneva with the Human Rights Council. The answer is yes, that's a great idea, that we should try to find a way with our remote technology to circulate letters. We have done written submissions in addition to undertaking this event. And our objective is to ensure that when we are presenting the materials, we're doing so in a way that somehow will lead to a special commission of inquiry to be bringing justice and accountability in Nigeria. It's impossible for the international community to continue to have a blindness to what's taking place. The statistics, the stories as told by Baroness Cox, the statistics and stories as told by both Baroness Cox and Stephen Enada highlight the scale of violence and the impunity, as well as the complete lack of effort, in my view, by the Nigerian government to actually protect the vulnerable communities. The numbers of IDPs is just astonishing. We need to step in the gap, and we need to bring about a formal investigation through a commission of inquiry by the United Nations. So yes, Jubilee Campaign joins with many other organizations, with David Alton, member of the House of Lords, Caroline Cox, member of the House of Lords, the Hungarian government, and many others who are calling for a commission of inquiry to take place. So we will put out more information about that. We do have the draft proposal that we will circulate. It's our hope that we will get a video of the Special Rapporteur's comments because of her investigation and her efforts. We would love to see that the Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial summary and arbitrary executions, that her presentation can still be found. So we'll be circulating this parallel event afterwards with subcaptions, and we would ask that all the organizations would promote the event after they receive links to it when it's made available through YouTube. So we would like to thank everyone who's participated with us today. We would like to thank for all the viewers that have participated with us today. Thank you all for providing us the questions and as well as the answers. And we do hope to bring about a change, and we do trust that justice and accountability will take place in Nigeria. Thank you all.